Good day, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We're going to get started with today's presentation, which is an introduction of Vortex Studio 2017A, the latest release of our simulation and visualization platform. My name is Jean-Pierre Picard. I'm Product Marketing Manager for Vortex Studio at CM Labs, and I'll be your host today. With me on the line is Marc-Alexandre Vizina, Product Manager for Vortex Studio. Marc-Alexandre, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, GP.
All right. So today's presentation will last about an hour. We split into a few sections. We're going to start by doing a quick review of recent releases, and then we're going to jump into the new features of Vortex Studio 2017A. That's the main section that we'll go through, and we'll have a few live demos of the main new features, especially the new editors and some of the new scene management features peppered through the presentation. We're also going to finish with the presentation of the new Vortex Studio online account, and we're going to explain how to download the Vortex Studio Essentials free edition for those of you who are joining us and are wondering how you can get your own copy. And we're going to finish with the live Q&A. But if during the presentation you have questions you'd like to send us, use the right-hand side questions box, and we'll do our best to help answer them as we go along. If you have issues with audio or visuals as well, please let us know. We'll do our best to troubleshoot it as it comes up. We've not included today's presentation materials. We're having some issues with the GoToWebinar tool to do so, but we will include a copy in the follow-up email that we will send tomorrow. And this will include a recorded version of today's webinar as well. So if at any point you feel like you would like to share this with colleagues or you have to go, then rest assured that you'll get a full copy that you can browse at your own pace. All right. One of the things I'd like to address before we look at Vortex Studio 2017A is kind of clarifying what Vortex Studio is in regards to our previous software product, Vortex Software Solution. Now, those of you who have been working with CM Lab software products for a while will know that Vortex Software Solution has been on the market for a few years. And Vortex Studio is basically the next evolution of Vortex Software Solution. Over the years, we've started with Vortex Software Solution as a way to provide a front end to perform mechanical modeling for the dynamics libraries that are part of Vortex Studio. But over the years, we've really boosted and enhanced Vortex Software Solution beyond simple mechanical modeling. We've added tools that really cover the entire spectrum of simulation creation and distribution, from model design and management to scene building and even system integration. And because of that, we've decided that we would take the occasion to rebrand Vortex Software Solution as Vortex Studio. We really want to reflect the full offering that Vortex Studio has, which is a set of professional desktop tools, a fully integrated image generator, the extensive SDK that we've always offered and now also encompasses things that are related to enhancing the desktop tools, and of course our industry-leading physics-based dynamics engine. What that means for you, if you're a Vortex Software Solution user, if you have Vortex 6.8 or 6.7, is that we feature the same upgrade path as before, and you have full backwards compatibility following the usual rules. So upgrading is very easy. It's not more complex. In fact, it's going to be made simpler than previous versions, and you will not have to purchase new licenses if you have an active MNS. You still get access to this version. All right, so now that this is cleared up, I'd just like for those of you who are not familiar with Vortex Studio, provide a bit of a flavor as to what it's used for. It's a platform that is used in multiple industries, mainly construction, where it's used to create training and engineering simulations for lifting and moving equipment. It's also used in the maritime industry, either for onshore cranes or offshore equipment, so it could be ship-based or offshore platform-based. And again, for creating training solutions or validating the design of new equipment. And of course, it's widely used in military and security. It's used for ground vehicle simulation. We provide industry-leading off-road vehicle simulation capabilities for both tracked and wheeled vehicle. And it's also used for robotic system design, be it for defense or engineering purposes. Now, today, Vortex Studio and its predecessor, Vortex Software Solution, powers over 1,000 cylinders worldwide, and it's used in over 35 countries. So we're really going with a solution that is the de facto standard for ground vehicle simulation and maritime equipment simulation. Something that's new with Vortex Studio is that we've expanded the offering in terms of the types of editions you can get, and the main new thing is the addition of the Essentials edition. It's a free platform, and you can use it for internal use, and it also has free commercial uses with some limitations, but still you could create commercial simulators using the Essentials edition. Now this comes complement our existing solo, team, and academic editions, and for those, if you need more information, I would really refer you to your CM Labs account manager or reseller. But the Essentials edition gives you a single development seat of the Vortex Studio editor and provides you full multi-body dynamics simulation capabilities. It also includes vehicles and cable simulation capabilities, but for internal use. So you cannot create commercial simulators that include vehicles and cable systems, but you could test the entire capabilities of Vortex Studio for these types of equipment and validate that it actually meets your requirements. So that's a great way to do some tests, get used to it, and then see build a value proposition for buying a solo or team edition, depending on what you're working on. So one other thing to keep in mind is Vortex Studio Essentials works on single computer simulator architectures, because this is it's a single node license. If you upgrade to one of our premium editions, you get full network and synchronized multi-channel simulator architecture support. So today we're going to look at a few things in the Vortex Studio Editor, which is our desktop application that's used to create simulation, create scenes, mechanical modeling, and also set up the deployment on of virtual scenes on your simulator. We're not going to show the Vortex player. The new features are mostly focused on a major revamp of the Vortex Studio Editor. The Vortex Studio player is the interface, the application you use to set up the distribution of your application over multiple nodes and participant over your network. All right, so what's new in Vortex Studio 2017? Let's get right into it. The first one and the major change is that we're featuring a big revamp of the Vortex Studio Editor. It's like big enhancements to the way it works, the way it streamlines the workflow, and the way teams can collaborate together. So we're going to spend a bit of time talking about it and then going into a live demo where we're really going to see it in action. Now, we're also introducing some new scenes that accelerate content creation at the scene level. New extensions to populate scene with objects, tweak the visuals all over the scene. So that's going to be a great time saver for scene designers. Finally, we're also providing expanded access with the free Essentials edition, but also with support for more graphic cards types and brands. And we're going to talk a bit about that at the end, why we're adding those specific graphic cards and who will stand to benefit from this. Now, all of the features we're showing today are available in Vortex Studio Essentials edition, as well as the Premium edition. So that's going to be great if you're just getting started with the Essentials edition. So let's jump right into the new enhanced tools that are shipped with Vortex Studio 2017. Now, the main changes that you're going to see is a brand new Vortex Studio Editor. And that new Vortex Studio Editor is going to provide a streamlined interface with, and Marc-Alexandre is going to talk about that in a moment, with a new toolbox that regroups all of the different tools that you have for mechanical modeling or for graphic design that are part of Vortex Studio. And it's going to be adapted to the type of document you're working on. Because of that, we're able to also expand the workspace by decluttering the interface, and that's great because when you're working on a busy scene, the more visual space you have, the better it is. We're also adding a layer of intelligence to the tools with contextual tools, drag and drop position of 3D objects, and there's a new homepage that's going to make things easier when you want to either get started or keep up with what's new for Vortex Studio and what's coming up. So Marc-Alexandre, maybe you could talk to us a bit about the new homepage. What was the inspiration for it, and what are we trying to achieve by changing this from what we had before?
If you're familiar with the previous version of Vortex software platform, the original homepage was just a blank screen waiting for you to load your work in progress or open up a new file. And it was kind of a wasted space. We wanted to make sure that Vortex Studio would be very welcoming to new user, as well as being providing as much help as possible to the workflow of existing user. So we went back and we thought about how we could better use the space, and what we came up with is the new homepage. So what it has three main purposes. The first one is to provide a centralized location to the features that you're not using very often. So the option panel, the about panel, even the access to documentation, you could go with F1, so you don't need to access by the help button. You can open and close a file from there, and that's grouped in the upper left corner of the home page, and it's something that you can access at all time with the home button that's located at the upper left corner of the screen. So that one you'll see as we progress through the demo, it's always available. So you can always come back to the home page to select one of those options. The central portion of the page is split in two. The upper portion is to create new document type. So basically, if you're opening a new scene or starting a new mechanism, you can double click on any of these icons and to open a new file, or press the create button when one of the icons is selected. You'll notice that there's quite a bit of space there. We're leaving ourselves room for growth because in the next few years we expect additional functionality to be available from this section. At the bottom of the home page, you've got the recently opened section. Now, the purpose of this is to provide an easier way to access your work in progress. So at the end of the day, you just shut down your computer, you go home. The next morning you come back, you want to continue working on your scene or your mechanism. You don't have to go through open and then find it throughout the multiple folder of your computer. You can just go right to the recently open, click on the file, and then continue where you left off. Finally, the right-hand portion of the screen is our communication panel, if you will. We're calling it the Vortex Studio channel. It provides an RSS feed to the Vortex Studio blog, which is also available from the CM Lab website. And the blog will provide a window into the Vortex Studio development team's daily work. So basically here we're going to put announcement, upcoming feature, but we're also going to put tutorial, best practice, and ways to help you better use Vortex Studio. At the very bottom of the screen, you also have hyperlinks to our social media page, so Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook, as well as the YouTube channel, which we're busy populating with a lot of new videos, such as video tutorial and other display that will be useful to most users.
Thank you, Marc-Alexandre. Now, one of the things that's being added with the new Vortex Studio editor, and I find this really interesting because it shows how we're trying to improve the entire workflow for not just using Vortex Studio, but installing it, is the new license manager. Can you talk to us a bit about what's changed as far as license management goes for Vortex Studio and what the license manager can do?
So for Vortex Studio, we moved to a new licensing system, which is, instead of being file-based, is based on activation code. So that allows us to have a much easier way to control what license are installed and to renew and make sure that everything is up and running. So if you access the About page in the main homepage of the software, there's a button in the upper right corner that's called License Manager. And if you click on it, you'll access this separate application that's called the Vortex License Manager, which allows you to see which license are installed on your computer, when they expire, and when your maintenance and support expire as well. And it also allows you to add additional license and also to control the activation. And this is linked to a page on the CM Labs website, which is your account, which GP will showcase later in this webinar, and this will allow you to activate and renew your license from a distance. So the goal of this was to make life easier for people like system integrator who are preparing a lot of new simulator or managing a big pool of existing simulator. This is going to make their lives much easier.
So that's great. Now, I think the most dramatic change that regular Vortex Studio users will notice is the move to a toolbox approach for the editor. Now, could you talk a bit about the design challenges we're trying to address with the toolbox, and a bit what are the main advantages that it provides over the previous approach of toolbars and drop-down menus?
The thing with toolbar is that they're always displayed on screen. So as Vortex grows and starts to gain capabilities and feature, those toolbar were getting bigger and longer and taking up more and more of the space. And though a lot of people are using big screens nowadays, you still want to have as much space as possible dedicated to the work that you're doing. Also, you don't want to have to hunt for that particular icon where, okay, where is that feature? I can't find it. So what we did is that we move all the objects into a panel that we call the toolbox. And the toolbox is normally located at the upper left of the screen, but like all panels in the Vortex interface, it can be unpinned and moved to whatever location you deem comfortable. So if you have access to two screens, for example, it's quite possible for you to take the toolbox, place it on the second screen, and just keep working on the main screen. It's really up to you. So what the toolbox is that all the objects, the simulation objects, are located in there, broken down into a number of categories: basic, audio, cable system, camera, and so on. In each category, you have a display of the various objects that you can access from there. Also, at the top of the toolbox, there's a search bar where you can enter the name or even just part of the name of the object that you're looking for, and the toolbox will only display the object that you asked for. For example, if you're looking to add a spotlight, just type spot and the spotlight will appear in the toolbox ready to be used. So the toolbox, it organizes objects in logical groupings. So depending on where you are in the application, the toolbox will show you different things. So if you're in a scene, it's going to show you the objects that can be included in the scene. If you're in the graphic gallery, it's only going to show you the objects that you can use in the graphic gallery. If you're in the setup editor, it's only going to show you, again, the module and the preset and the extension that you can use in the setup editor. This, of course, reduces the clutter, and it scales much better because we can keep adding on objects. To use the toolbar, the toolbox, you can simply drag and drop the objects. So you grab them in the toolbox and you just bring them into the main viewport and place them wherever you need. You can also double click on an object to automatically send it to the end of the Explorer hierarchy, or you can just drag it to the exact position that you need it to be in the Explorer hierarchy.
Thank you. Now, the toolbox is a great way to organize tools that are not necessarily object specific, but what about all the different options that we had in the drop-down menus that were specific for certain objects? Where are they available now?
Well, we've moved them to what we call contextual menu. So basically, when you right-click on an object, it displays a series of options that you can apply to that specific object. And every time, this is smart. It's contextual. So you only see what's available for that particular object. So if you're on a graphic node, for example, and you have the CAD Importer license installed, it's going to show you all the various tools that are available to apply to a graphic node. If you're in a part and you're trying to create a collision geometry, it's only going to show you the collision geometry. It's not going to show you the graphic tools because obviously you can't apply them to a part. And this is repeated throughout the application. So every time we're trying to minimize the space taken by the controls and only give you what you can use at that spot. So that reduces the time spent just moving the mouse about and looking for option. You can just go directly to what you need.
Great. Now, we're going to jump into a live demo very soon, but just before we do that, I'd like to just maybe talk a bit about one of the other new features we've added that it is really about enhancing the way teams work with Vortex Studio Editor. And it's the way to export graphic files that you've already implemented. Now, could you talk to us a bit about what the design vision is with that and where it fits into that vision?
Well, what we want to do is make the whole process of building a new simulation as easy as possible. So beforehand, the usual workflow is that an artist would build a 3D model, hand it over to a mechanical engineer to do a simulation. Then this would be integrated in the scene, and once the final package was done, handed it over to a system integrator for deployment on the actual hardware. The problem with that approach is that it's very linear. You can't get started until the person before you in the chain is done. So every time there's a delay, it has a rollover effect, and then you end up with a project that's completely blown its deadline. So what we do instead in Vortex Studio is that each of the person working on the project has his own file type. So the 3D artist is working in the graphic gallery, the mechanical engineer is working the mechanism, the scenario designer is working the scene, and the system engineer is working in the setup file. And nothing prevents them from working on their part of the project side by side. So, for example, a graphic artist will provide to the mechanical engineer a really basic model on texture, just for example, cylinders for wheel and a box for the chassis of the vehicle. And then these positions to start building his parts, his constraint, his scripts, testing it, and just validating his simulation. Meanwhile, the 3D artist is making the final model, and he's unwrapping it, creating the texture, and so on. And the scenario designer don't have to wait for these guys. He can get started on the scene, prepare the terrain, place objects, fiddle with the lighting, put in any control script that are needed using just temporary boxes, for example. And then they all come together because the 3D artist will hand over gallery to the mechanical engineer, and the mechanical engineer will simply replace the graphic gallery in his mechanism with the new one, and then the model will be updated. If he wants to see additional change, he can now export the model back to a 3D modeling format, hand it over to the artist. The artist can make additional change, put it in a graphic gallery, and it back to the mechanical engineer. That way we've got a flow between the various workers on the project. And meanwhile, of course, the system engineer can use the setup editor to prepare his configuration file and test for hardware integration for control motion and run his debugging tool.
Okay, that's great. And now, where does the graphic asset export fit into that workflow you just presented?
Well, one of the problems there was before was that the 3D artist would hand over a model to the mechanical engineer, and the mechanical engineer will go back and say, well, that's not what I need in terms of graphic nodes, so I'm just going to move about and rename nodes and all that, and then they need a change. The artist had to go back to his original file, repeat those changes so that they're in sync, and that was an enormous loss of time. So what we're doing instead here is that the artist, the mechanical engineer can now export the graphic gallery as an FBX file, hand it over to the artist for opening in, say, 3ds Max or whatever 3D modeling software that they're using, and all the changes to the node, the renaming, all of this will be preserved, so the artist can keep working from where the mechanical engineer was at. And then when he hands back a graphic gallery, we can just replace the graphic gallery, and since the node name and structure will match, there's no work necessary. The mechanical engineer can just drag and drop the new graphic gallery, and then all the changes will be reflected in there. So it's a major time saver.
Excellent. Now we're going to start with our first live demo portion of the webinar. So Marc Alessandro, I'm just going to pass you over to control, and maybe you can give us a quick live tour of the new editor.
Thank you, GP. So what you see here is the Vortex Studio homepage. So as we mentioned before, we've got our main controls up here. We've got our file access in the middle and our studio channel on the right-hand side. So open and close are self-explanatory. Option, if you click on it, opens the old option panel that used to be located at the top of the screen. And from here you can check the default material table, the configuration of the editor. You can pick the anti-aliasing method that you wish to use. Screen space ambient occlusion, whether to use it or not, when we're going to explain that one later. If you want to have default light, what add-ons you can load, what plugins you can load. So there's a lot of option on this side. And you'll notice that when I close the panel, it goes back to the scene that I'm working on. The About panel has been reworked. Now the important information is all located at the top. So whenever you send in the support ticket, all the information that we need is now located right up here. So it's super easy to take that, copy it down, and put it in the support ticket. And again, it accelerates the process and make it easier for everybody involved. The license status up here, when you click on it, it triggers the Vortex License Manager. So you can see that it shows all the licenses that are installed on my computer, gives me an option to activate other license. So GP will give us a tour of this process later on toward the end of the webinar. So if we close this, you'll notice that we go back to our scene. At any time, I can switch between the home page and the scene that I'm on. The help file has been reworked a lot. Now the Vortex Studio documentation is available as HTML file, and it's also available on the CM Labs website. You'll notice that it's been extensively reworked, so now it's a lot easier to use. You've got a getting started section for newcomers, a guide for the editor, the player, the SDK, a guide for an artist, the engineers. We'll have one for system integrators soon. We now have a list of tutorials and sample that you can use to learn the software, and an in-depth glossary. So the documentation is a lot more useful than it used to be. So if we go back again, and of course exit is self-explanatory. If I click on one of these, if I double click, it opens the required file. I can also press on the create button. At the bottom, I've got my list of recently opened file that I can click to open a new file. And at the right-hand panel is our Vortex Studio channel. So you can see that we've got all the recent posts that we've made on using the Vegetation Field, a big project that we did for Zeman, video tutorial that we're now deploying, and so on and so forth. If we go to our scene, now this is the defense vehicle scene that is included in the sample of Vortex Studio. You can see here we've got the toolbox. So depending on what you're clicking on, you see the various objects that are available. If you're getting used to the toolbox and you don't need the full description, you can just drag it like this, close it down, and use only the icon as a reminder. It gives you more space to display the various objects. So that's kind of nice. Obviously, the category here will change over time as we add more capability. We'll add new objects in there. If you're squeezing like this, you can see that you can scroll down in the toolbox as well. The Explorer panel hasn't changed, so that's still here. We have up here in the corner, we've got a controller for the panel that are displayed. So if I want to display the configuration, I can click on it like this. And you can unpin all the panel or pin them all. You can also access the material table, the inspector, or the profiler from here. So it's very, very useful. And the one that has changed the least, I think, is the property panel here. That still works as before. We've changed a bit the style sheet to make it easier to read. You can still adjust the width as needed. To insert objects in your scene, you can basically just double-click to put them in the Explorer window, or you can drag them in the scene. So to show you this, first we're going to turn off the light. So we're just going to put this on nighttime. And then I'm going to go to a light, choose a spotlight, and then I'm just going to drag it to the scene, and you can see that I can now place it wherever I need it to be in real time. We've moved the manipulator to the top of the screen, so now you've got move, rotate, scale, and measure. In the simulation button, I've been moved to the bottom of the screen, so kind of like a VCR or a movie player. You've got your button at the bottom with some information about the state of the simulation, the time, the frame, and the frame per second. So these are now displayed readily, so you can use that information to optimize your scene. Going back to the move objects, now we've got a new feature, which is this coordinate panel. So you can see in real time the coordinate and the delta from its previous position. And you can also rotate the object like this. And we'll just click at the right spot. I'm just adjusting my light like this, and I'm not happy with the position. But if I go and then it's already oriented, it's in local space, it's kind of hard to move. So I can click on this little icon here, and it gives me the manipulator in world space. So it makes it a lot easier to change the position of any object that you've included in the scene. And when you're done, you just click on it, and it goes away, and it gives you a lot more space than before. And this can be done with pretty much any object in the scene. So if we go back to this, We go back to light, and it's just basically drag and drop. So for example, if I want to add an ocean to the scene, I can just add it here, and we just created a deluge, so a flood. So GP, back to you.
Thank you, Marc-Alexandre. Now, we're going to get back to our presentation and talk a bit about some new tools we have for scene designers. So as we looked earlier, you know, scene designers are one of the different types of team members that will use Vortex Studio. And scene designers are tasked with creating immersive environments, and a lot of that comes with the realistic and numerous implementation of cultural objects and vegetation. Now, Vortex Studio has been supporting speed tree assets for quite a while now and ships with a library of pre-optimized vegetation assets. But scene designers have had to place them manually one by one up to now. Each asset were instanced, so from a performance perspective, it was not necessarily a problem, but from a productivity perspective and also from a realism perspective, it can be somewhat challenging to place all of these assets individually. Now, Marc-Alexandre, maybe you can talk to us about how we're addressing that situation in 2017.
So we've included a new tool that's called the Vegetation Field. And what the Vegetation Field does is that it automates the process of creating large areas of vegetation. So what it does is that you define a zone, kind of like an earthwork zone, where you want vegetation asset to be populated. And the tool will automatically handle the randomization of the various objects within the scene. So not all your trees look the same. It will randomize the position as well, and it will take care of all the optimization. So the level of detail, the billboarding, so when trees are very far away, they become flat. The idea being to make your life as easy as possible. So to create a large forest, you can even define zone where there's no vegetation in the forest to create paths, for example. So I'll show it to you in a few minutes live.
So another thing that we're working on in making it more efficient for scene designers is related to ambient occlusion. Those of you who have been using Vortex for a few releases will probably remember that in Vortex Software Solutions 6.7, we introduced new graphic channels to the graphics gallery, and one of them was the ambient occlusion channel. If you're not familiar with graphic design, ambient occlusion is basically like predefined self shadows, and you can kind of see the difference here in this image where these connections between different pieces of our model should not be lit up this way. And when we add the ambient occlusion channel to our model, it provides that depth to it. It makes it more realistic. Now, setting this up for each model can be challenging. So Marc-Alexandre, maybe you can talk to us about what.
So we want to have occlusion, which is the absence of light in various corner and hard to reach places across our scene, because obviously in real life there's shadows in every crevices, and it helps provide volume to the various model. But if we were to calculate the shadowing for all objects in the scene, it would be cost prohibitive in terms of computing power, and we wouldn't be able to do a real-time simulation. So what we do instead is that we do sort of a cheat, which is a post-processing effect that we're applying to the entire screen, which is a technique coming from computer gaming, which is called screen space ambient occlusion. And what it does is that it samples the scene to find corners and edges between objects, and then it draws a shadow over it, and it blurs, adds some noise, it blurs the shadow so that it looks like a shadow and not just a black line. So it's not a perfect technique. It has some shortcoming, but if you need to add volume to your scene, you can always enable it and see if it improves the scene. It's something that you reach from the option panel, so it can be turned on or off. If it's turned on, it's going to draw the shadow across the entire scene. So really, it's something that you need to use on a case-by-case basis. It's not going to work super well with some scene. With other, it's going to make a major difference. We will continue to improve this technology as we go on over time to try and make it more and more efficient. The end goal being, of course, to create something that looks very realistic in terms of shadow, but with practically no user input.
And Marc-Alexandre, you've already mentioned that you can turn it on in the Vortex Studio editor in the options panel, which you can see right here. It's under the anti-aliasing setting. Now, with the player, it is a simple extension that you add in your setup document. That is correct?
Yeah, exactly. So you just, in your setup editor, you just go take the screen space ambient occlusion and drag it to your configuration panel. In the editor, it's already available as an option so that you don't have to go through that additional step while you're working.
Great. Now, another feature that we're adding is a color grading extension. And the color grading extension is a new step in the fine-tuning process, as I understand it. Maybe you could provide a bit more explanation as to who will use it and how complex it is to use and why you would want to use it.
So color grading is something that modifies the color and the lighting across the entire screen space. So it's a post effect that's applied after the image is generated. Color grading is something that's used extensively in the movie industry. So if you want to have a better looking movie, they're going to go and adjust the color and change the definition of the light so that objects pop up, colors pop up better. And now we have an extension to allow you to do something similar in your simulation. It allows you to modify color using display profile and also adjust how the light reflects across various objects. Now, if you look at the screenshot that you have here on the car, what we did is that we applied the color grading extension to a basic scene with a car in it. It enriches the color of the car. In this case, it also had a happy side effect of remove some unwanted shadow. It's not something that's going to always happen, but sometimes if you tune your color grading correctly, it's going to go and eliminate these artifacts across the scene. The color grading extension also supports lookup table-based color filter. So basically, that's a rather advanced technique. You're going to need an artist for that and somebody who's aware of how color grading work. It's not super user-friendly. The color grading extension does include a series of preset lookup tables. So for example, to apply a sepia filter or a high exposure filter, those are already included in the application. You can also create your own custom lookup table, but for that you need to go through a rather involved process using a software such as Photoshop, and it's really an advanced feature for artists.
And we're going to soon get into a demo of some of those new features, but just before we move to that, maybe you can talk to us about Fluid Surface, which is a new tool that we're adding that will complement the maritime environment simulation capabilities we already have in Vortex Studio.
So for some scene, we've noticed that you don't need the full ocean simulation with the surface wave and the wind effect and so on. Sometimes you just doing, for example, underwater vehicle simulation, so you don't need to spend time on that. So what we have now is something that's called Fluid Surface, and it allows you to create an area of the scene which is, as the name said, a fluid. So you can define the density, the velocity, allows you to simulate the buoyancy, the drag at a current, but you don't have to spend time on computing time on calculating the surface wave or the underwater condition. You can always add a silt extension if you want to have control over your underwater condition, but it doesn't come by default because the point of the fluid surface is to allow you to have a fluid volume, basically, in which to test your objects.
Great, and I know we're not really going to have time to demonstrate the Fluid Surface tool today, so I'd just like to invite those of you that are on the line that are interested in learning more about it to join us for our next Vortex Studio University webinar, in which we'll look at Vortex Studio's hydrodynamics simulation capabilities. So we'll cover both the Fluid Surface and the broader maritime environment simulation capabilities, and we'll be hosting this webinar on Thursday, April 27th, so in about 2 weeks at 10 a.m. Eastern time. So you can find the registration link at cmlabs.com/Vortex University. And if you're not familiar with Vortex University, at that page you'll also see our past webinars. Now keep in mind that some of them will use the previous version of the editor, but it's still great content if you want to learn about how some of the more advanced features work. We've done tire models, vehicle simulation, for example. We've done also earth moving simulation, so this can be a great source of information. Now we're going to jump into a live demo of the vegetation field. Marc-Alexandre, I'm going to pass you the controls. There you go.
All right, so what I've done here is that I've taken the forwarder sample and I've removed all the speed trees that we individually planted in the surface. Now, what we're going to do is that we're going to put a vegetation field in the environment section. We've got the tool here, and I'm just going to drag it over the scene. And you can see that the accessory appears right here. So I need to place it on my scene like this. You'll notice that there's already some trees in it. That's because the vegetation field comes with a sample tree. We're just going to delete it because we don't need it. So the first thing we're going to do is that we're going to resize it to approximately match the size of the forest that we want to make. Doesn't really matter if we go a bit too large. It's always better if there we go. So we're going about, yeah, that sounds about right. So it looks good. Now we need to populate this with trees. So we go to the vegetation section and we need to find a tree. Now I want to find the Scots pine, which is the type of tree that's mostly used for forestry. So I type Scott, and just by typing Scott, I've got my 2 examples of Scots pine. So I just take it and I drag it to the vegetation field itself, and the trees automatically populated. But as you can see, they're flying in the air, which is not something that we want. So first, we need to go and attach the vegetation field to the terrain node. So we're going to go here, and we're going to go into our terrain, and we're going to find the ground. There we go. And now our trees are attached to the are going to be attached to the soil. We're just going to trigger the capture to put them in the right location. There we go. So now we've got our trees in the area, but there's not a lot of them. So we're going to go back to vegetation field, and we're going to simply increase the density. I'm using, you can type in your own number, but in this case I'm using the middle mouse button to just open up the number. So we're just going to put quite a bit. Let's go nuts. So we're going to create a very, very dense forest. We keep adding like this. Now, if I'm not happy with the randomization of the scene, I can always change the seed. So the seed is a number from which the randomization is started from. So you can just change this until you find the starting position that you're happy with. You'll see that all the trees are automatically instanced, and the level of detail is automatically taken care of. So basically, when we go inside the forest, you can see that the trees are automatically changed at a distance into a billboard. So you can see that they're all flat from this distance, but when we plunge in, they're replaced by an actual 3D model. And the trees also have their own graphic, their own collision geometry. So you can see that they all have a capsule at the base of the trunk so that they can collide with, say, a vehicle. And we haven't put a collision geometry up top so that you can go through the branches, and it simplifies motion through the forest. So now this is really nice, but we'd like to make a little bit of room inside this dense forest. So we're going to have to put what we call a density map. So what the density map is, it's a texture that we apply on top of the forest. So I'm just importing a 3D graphic here, so you can see that That's what it looks like. And then we're going to go here and we're going to apply it to our vegetation field. And there we go. You can see that the vegetation field now has no tree in the space where it's black and trees in the space where it's white. Now, you can put also gray areas, and all the gray areas are going to do is that they're going to change the density proportionally to the to that area. So if you put 50% gray, it's going to be 50% of the density that you've expressed here. So you can use that to create paths, clearings, other area in the forest. If you need precise tree placement, because the vegetation field is created to randomly place tree, it might be better to just go to the vegetation section and just take individual trees and just place them along the exact position that you need them to be. So along a road, for example. But for massive area, the vegetation field is actually a very good tool, and one that's not very costly in terms of computing power.
Thank you, Marc-Alexandre. All right, so let's get back to the last section of our presentation before I move on to a demonstration of how you can go and create your own Vortex Studio online account and download Vortex Studio and also get your free Essentials license if that's what you're looking for. So before we look into Vortex Studio Essentials, I'd like to talk a bit about the expansion of the graphic cards that we now support for Vortex Studio. And these new graphics we're supporting the onboard Intel HD graphics and NVIDIA Quadro graphic cards are there because they are part of growing segments for Vortex Studio, right, Marc-Alexandre?
Yes. So beforehand, Vortex used to support only the NVIDIA GeForce card, which are powerful graphic cards that are well suited to the amount of information we're pushing to the screen. But we wanted to support a wider subset of the market, particularly in engineering and academic. So in engineering, they tend to use the Quadro card instead, which are better suited for engineering and CAD purposes. Meanwhile, in the academic world, they often use laptops with basic Intel processing card or AMD GPUs. So now that we're trying to get Vortex Studio widespread across more markets and more fields, we wanted to make sure that everybody had a chance to run Vortex Studio on the machine, the hardware that they had. So it was important to us to go beyond the GeForce and now support the Quadro, the Intel, the AMD card. And as time goes on, we'll try to support more and more graphic processing unit in the market.
Now, I think it's safe to say that you can't expect the same performance out of an Intel onboard graphics card, right? But will you be able to run, for example, a robotics type of scene, something smaller and more controlled with the laptop?
Well, obviously, a basic Intel card will not provide you with the same power to display a large simulation. But if you're just doing an engineering study or just a basic robotic simulation, these will be more than powerful enough to display the data on the screen.
Thank you. Now, Vortex Studio Essentials, which I've already mentioned, also plays into this expanded access focus that we've given to Vortex Studio 2017A. If you're not familiar with Vortex Studio Essentials, we've talked a bit briefly at the start of the webinar about it. It's a free edition that includes full access to Vortex Studio Editor and Vortex Studio Player applications. You also get unlimited access to our physics-based multi-body dynamics engine. So anything that you want to do that is related to contacts, and you can also do robotic systems and some powered systems, for example, a forklift, which we have in our own tutorials using the multi-body dynamics engine and the built-in constraints of the Vortex Studio Editor. Now, we also provide access to the vehicle, tire modeling, and cable system simulation capabilities of Vortex Studio, but these are restricted for non-commercial uses only. Now, if you're doing an engineering study, a robotic system design that either for a competition or for pure R&D, then you can use these to your heart's content, and that's going to be really great because this is something that's a lot more advanced than what's available on the market. It's also very interesting if you want to test Vortex Studio's capabilities before you commit to a purchase, because you're not going to get an expiration date on this. It's not a demo, it's not a trial, it's a full-blown free version of the software. Now, Vortex Studio Essentials also includes the entire capabilities of our integrated visualization system. So we're talking about particles, special effects, all of these are available as well. If you're creating commercial applications, we do require that you use built-in watermarks, and you provide us with credits for powering the simulator, but you will be able to create a commercial simulator with this regardless. So I'm just going to jump into a quick getting started section because we've also updated our online portal to access Vortex Studio recently, and I think this is going to be a good chance to get introduced to how you can go and download the latest version of Vortex Studio. So we've moved from what we called previously My Vortex to a brand new portal that provides you with your own Vortex Studio account. And that's a single point of access for everything Vortex Studio. So we're talking about licenses, we're talking about runtimes, we're talking about downloads, tickets, online documentation, the forums, everything. So you can create your own account at cmlabs.com/account. So let's just open this up. And I already have my account, so I will log in with my demo account here. But if you want to create an account, you can simply go here at Create Account, and you can create either one with LinkedIn or with a very short form. It's really quick, and you're going to get an email asking you to confirm your password. So I'm just going to log in with my demonstration account, which does not have all the fancy licenses I have as CM Labs employees. So as soon as you log in, you're going to notice that there are a few explanations as to the main steps you can do. So let's say you've received an activation key from CM Labs support, then you can register it directly to your account in the licenses page. If you want to download Vortex Studio, maybe you already have your license, you can go to the downloads page. Now, if you're coming from Vortex Software Solution 6.8, 6.6, 6.7, you need to get an upgrade to your license because we've moved from one licensing system to another. But if you have an active M&S contract, then this is included free of charge. All you have to do is fill a short form and you'll be good to go. Now, let's start by getting Vortex Studio downloaded. So you simply go to the download section, and if you're going for a Vortex Studio Essentials installation, all you need to download is the Vortex Studio Windows file here. This will include the applications, dynamic library, and the image generator for Vortex Studio. I really recommend you download the samples, however, because getting started with Vortex Studio is something of an involved process. Obviously, this is a very powerful tool. The best ways to go about this is to go through our video tutorials and then move on to our samples list, which include a very useful guide that explains the different extensions that were used, how they were configured. So that's really part of the optimal path to becoming a Vortex Studio expert. Now, we also have a number of optional downloads. If you're installing, for example, Vortex Studio with multiple add-ons, so if you're using Vortex Solo, for example, and you want to have the human and the vegetation library, then you can download the Vortex Studio installer, and that's going to simplify deployment greatly. You can also get the CAD Optimizer add-on if you've purchased the optional add-on. And again, this optional add-on is not available for Essentials, but if you have Solo or Team Edition with the CAD Optimizer license, then you can download it here. And under Tools and Extra, we have new licensing tools that make it easy to manage licenses on server-locked or dongle-locked systems. We've got a debug kit as well if you're at the troubleshooting and optimization stage, and this is explained very well in our documentation. And we also have an offline version of the documentation available. So that's good if your computer is not facing the internet. You're going to have everything available locally. So you download Vortex Studio, and then you just go to your licenses page. So since I have a new account, I have no licenses. But if you had licenses, they would be displayed either under Vortex Studio Essential or the Solo, Team, and Academic section. If you had an activation key received by email from CM Labs support, this is where you would enter it, and this would then tie this activation key to your account, and it's going to allow you to do a manual activation if you wanted to. Now, for my case, what I want is a Vortex Studio Essentials activation key. So I'm just going to click here, and the page will automatically refresh to give me that activation key. So I've pre-installed Vortex Studio just to save us the time, and I'm just going to start the editor. And I'm going to show you how you can take that activation key and register it on your installation. So because I don't have a license right now, I get a pop-up telling me that I need to use the Vortex License Manager to activate a license. So I'm going to do that. And you have three options. So you have internet activation, really the easiest one. If you're facing the internet on with your computer, then that's the one you're going to want to use. Manual activation is a bit more complex, but we do have a nice blog post and information documentation on how to do it. And essentially, you just have to get some information from your computer here entered on the online portal. But for our case today, we're going to use internet activation. And finally, if you are using a server-locked licensing model, then you need to connect your own server, and that's where you're going to set it up. So as I mentioned, we're going to do a an online activation. So what I'll do is I'll copy my license key here, my activation key, and I will come back and do internet activation and simply paste it in the activation key field. I press on activate, give it a second, and then you can see that I have a license for the editor and Vortex Studio Essentials. So I'm just going to click on Home, finish this, restart my application, and I am up and running. My license is now active, and I'm good to go. Now, if I wanted to modify my licenses, I would simply go into the About section, click on License Status, and I can open back the License Manager and add other licenses. So if I, for example, purchased Vortex Studio Solo Edition, I come back here, add my other license, and I will get the full features that are part of Solo. I'm just going to close this and go back to our presentation. Now, which files to download? I mentioned this briefly, but this is for future reference. If you're a Vortex Studio Essential user, I recommend you get obviously Vortex Studio, but also the samples and the documentation. It's nice to have it available at hand, although there is a direct link to the online version of the documentation if you don't have it installed locally. Solo team users, you're going to want to get Vortex Studio, Human, and Vegetation libraries. The installers simplify the installation of everything, and again, samples, and if you're working on an offline computer, the documentation. And if you're using server locked, it's going to be the same thing, but you're also going to want to download the licensing tools. Now, if you're a more advanced user and you're ready to get to the optimization stage, the debug kit is also a very nice add-on to download. I mentioned we have tutorials to get started with Vortex Studio. So we have 3 at the moment, and we're building the list. And I invite you, if you have specific requests for video tutorials, to also send us an email at webinars@cmlabs.com. But right now we have a lengthy video explaining how to create a mechanism using simple constraints. So you're going to be creating a operational forklift and then building a scene in which you can deploy it. And finally, you'll learn how to use the player to run the application you've just built. You can find them at cmlabs.com/tutorials. And again, we're going to be building this list as we go forward, so it's going to be an involving set of learning tools. Once you're done with the tutorials, really jump into the user guide. It's available online. If I go back to my account, you're going to see it right here. So I can open it, and the entire Vortex Studio documentation is available. And you're going to have even more tutorials available depending on which type of role you have from here. So after you've done the video tutorials, you can jump in there, and then you can jump to the samples. And the samples, again, what's really interesting is you have a very wide set of samples, and each of them come with their own extension and explanation in our sample starting guide. So you can simply, pick the one that's related to what you want to do. So let's say you want to do work on earth moving, then you're going to open up our excavator sample, and you're going to look at the documentation, and you'll learn how to set up your own earth moving zone, how to add earth moving tools, a bucket to a mechanism. Now, if you have any questions after you get started, I really invite you to visit our new community forums. And again, if I go back to my online account, the forums are accessible once you're logged in. Right here, community forums. And it's a great place to go and ask questions, and our staff and other users will be there to help you. So just jump on there, and we're going to have a discussion about this today's webinar as well as soon as we're done, and we'll include a link in our follow-up email. So if you have questions, feedback on the webinar, things you'd like to see added to future webinars, or just reactions to what we've shown today, you'll be able to share that with our team here, and also with other users who can also provide their own reactions. And finally, we've mentioned that we have a new Vortex Studio blog. It's featured on the homepage, but if you want to go back and see past articles, you can also visit it directly at cmlabs.com/blog. We're posting at least one new article every week. You're going to get previews of new features, information about how to make the most of new releases. We're going to talk about industry trends and obviously webinars that are coming up. So we're really hoping that you're going to come and browse the information that's available. So that's going to be it for today's presentation. I'd like to thank everybody on the line for joining us today. I know we are getting to the end of our predicted 1 hour period. It's been pretty packed, but we're still going to stay on the line and we're going to take live questions now. So to do so, simply open up the GoToWebinar interface, use the right-hand side questions box, and we're going to take them as they go. And if you have questions that are related to a specific project, go ahead, send them to us, and we will take them obviously privately by responding by text. So if you're leaving us, again, thank you for joining us. We're going to send a copy of the presentation and the video recording tomorrow by email. So Marc-Alexandre, I have a first question here that I would like to get started, and it is related to Vortex Studio Essentials. Now, we've mentioned a bit about the different capabilities of Vortex Studio Essentials, but one of our attendees would like to know if you can simulate tracked vehicle using Vortex Studio Essentials.
You can with the vehicle system. However, the vehicle system is not included as part of the commercially available features for Vortex Essentials. So you cannot do commercial work with Essential and building a tracked vehicle, but you can do it for research purposes, for training purposes, in-house training, or just to know the system better.
So that means that if you were working, for example, on an off-road type robot that used track systems and you were just trying to develop your own system, you can use Vortex Studio Essentials out of the box. You have everything you need.
Exactly. So if you're a student, you're doing a project for learning robotics, you're building a simulation of your robot to save time, yeah, you can use the track system in the vehicle system to build your own thing. If you're a commercial system integrator that's building military simulator, then you cannot use the track vehicle system because it's not part of the Essential license for commercial use.
Now, regarding the transition from Essentials to solo or team license, will files be compatible between both versions, or are they locked to their own editions?
The files are not locked per se, it's the feature that are locked. So if I were to, for example, open the excavator sample in an Essential Edition editor, I would still see the scene and the excavator and the dump truck. However, the earthwork zone will not be present because it's not part of the Essential Edition, and the bucket, the blade, any earthwork related system are not available in Essential, so they're going to be grayed out and they're not going to be accessible in your scene. However, if I close down the scene and I hand the file over to somebody who has a solo or team license, then they open it up, the earthwork zone, the earthwork tool, they're all going to be available to them because their license cover the use of their tool. So you can send a file to an Essential user back and forth, and it's not going to damage the file in any way.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so the next question we have is again related to Essentials, and I guess I will take this one. So we have a user here that is asking, how does it work for additional Essentials license if people can get more than one? So what we ask is that if you want to have a second Essentials license, simply create a second account for the person who will be using that license. So if you're building a simulator, for example, that's going to be for internal use and you're a team, then get one of your colleagues to register and create their own license. This way it makes it a lot easier because it is automated. If there are needs to reset a license, you can always contact the licensing team through your online account, and we'll take a look on a case-by-case basis. If you're working on a commercial simulator that you want to distribute to customers that use, for example, the multi-body dynamics portion only, then you will need to create accounts for these final users on the portal and then download their license on there. So, but you can create those accounts as long as you have a new person you want to add, then that's not a problem, and you'll be able to create, as you've seen, an activation key in just a few minutes. So I'm seeing some questions related to specific projects, and again, feel free to send those to us. We understand that some projects we can't really share publicly, so we'll take the questions either offline or by text right now. So yes, please send them our way. All right, so we have a question here about Vortex Studio compatibility with Windows version. So which versions is Vortex Studio editor and the SDK compatible on?
Vortex Studio has been extensively tested on Windows 10, so that's what we officially support. In the past, Vortex 6.7, 6.8 have been used on Windows 7 and 8 with no problem. I would expect Vortex Studio to have no issue running on Windows 8. But however, as I said, we've run the test mostly on Windows 10, so I cannot officially say that Windows 8 is supported, but it should work with no problem.
Thank you. I have a licensing question from a user that is on Vortex Software Solution 6.8, and the question is related to the fact that we've mentioned that users would only now have to upgrade existing licenses one time since we remove new systems. Now, in the past, when we released a new version, users who wanted to upgrade their license to the latest release would have to fill an upgrade request form. That's not the case anymore, from what I understand. Could you explain a bit how that's going to work?
Yeah, for upgrading Vortex now, all the licensing is moved to the My Account section, so it's really easy to get a new license and adjust your license status. Also, we're going to have new release every 3 months or so. So, for example, we just launched Vortex Studio 2017A. We'll have Vortex 2017B. That's coming up in a couple of months that you'll be able to download and install and seamlessly work from one to the other. One of the important things that we wanted to address with Vortex Studio was to make sure that the upgrading process was as streamlined as possible and as painless as possible, so that all Vortex Studio user can benefit from the bug fixes and the new feature as soon as possible.
And I believe now that licenses that users will download or activate are tied, will work with any releases that are made available before their MNS expiration date, right?
Yeah, correct. So if you still have a valid maintenance and support agreement during the time where the MNS license is active, you'll be able to upgrade Vortex to the new version wherever you need to. In fact, we advise you, since it's easy to do, to keep current. So whenever a new version comes out, B, C, or D every year, update. You're really going to benefit from the improvement that we've made to the software.
Thank you. So we have a question here about the tutorials. Yes, we didn't have those before, so I'm just going to scroll back here. If you want to try and watch our tutorials, simply go to cmlabs.com/tutorials. They are right now specific to these topics, and again, if you have any suggestions, send them our way, but they're available to all. And yes, this is a new set of videos. It's going to be with the new Vortex Studio Editor interface, the latest version of the Vortex player, so that's a great way to ramp up. So I'm seeing the list of questions slowing down and mostly focusing on a few very specific projects. So Marc-Alexandre, I believe we're going to take these offline. However, if you have further questions, keep asking them. We're going to remain on the line and take them. For those of you who don't have any further questions, thank you again for joining us, and make sure that you get a copy of the webinar in tomorrow's follow-up email, and we hope to see you in 2 weeks for our Vortex University webinar. You can sign up at cmlabs.com/vortex-university. Again, thank you for joining us today, and especially those who stayed once we went in overtime. Thank you.